On a snowy Utah mesa, a former Navy SEAL took a ranger job that was supposed to end in 3 months. He trusted maps, field notes, and locked doors more than he trusted people. Then a faint bark rose from a collapsed rock pit near the Red Cliffs. The German shepherd he pulled from the cold would not simply follow him home. Condor kept looking toward the high stone ledges, where falcons circled and old paperwork began to crack. What Reuben found was not just a wildlife case, but a truth his own past had been waiting for someone to read. Share your own interesting, touching story with an animal you love, and don't forget to like, share, and subscribe to the channel. North Candle Mesa looked almost gentle at the end of winter. Snow lay thin across the red sandstone, not deep enough to bury the land, only enough to soften its edges. The mesa rose in shelves and broken ledges beneath a pale Utah sun, with juniper trees bent by years of wind and cliff faces glowing copper where the light touched them. Far above the north rim, a dark bird moved on a cold current of air, wingtips steady, body small against the enormous blue. Reuben Slate watched it for longer than the job required. The seasonal closure signs had gone up 2 weeks earlier, hammered into frozen ground near trail forks, old climbing approaches, and the narrow footpaths that led too close to known raptor nesting sites. In spring, peregrines would return to the cliffs. For now, the ledges were quiet, but quiet did not mean empty. Reuben had learned that a long time ago. On paper, his work was simple: patrol the trails, check the signs, document resource damage, report trespass, erosion, illegal access, and anything else that did not belong inside North Candle Mesa Wildlife Reserve. The contract lasted 3 months. That was the part he liked best. 3 months did not ask a man to belong. 3 months did not expect him to plant himself in a town, attend dinners, join boards, or sit under fluorescent lights while someone in a pressed shirt explained why a warning could not be called a warning until the right committee had reviewed the wording. 3 months was honest. It began. It ended. Nobody had to pretend it was family. Reuben lived in a small ranger cabin near the auxiliary station, a square building of weathered timber with a tin roof and one west-facing window. At night, he checked the door twice, some nights a third time. He did not call it fear. He did not call it anything. Naming a thing invited people to discuss it. He was 54, tall and broad in the old military way, with strength that looked less polished than permanent. His shoulders filled the olive-drab combat shirt he wore beneath a sandstone gray field jacket, the sleeves patterned in muted camouflage and banded at the upper arms. His hair was dark brown with silver at both temples, just long enough on top for the mesa wind to disturb it. A short salt and pepper stubble shadowed his jaw. His face had a weathered, almost romantic severity to it. High cheekbones, a nose slightly bent from an old impact, and hazel gray eyes that seemed trained to see what other people were eager to pass. He did not hurry. That morning the sound came from the east. A low thump rolled across the mesa, delayed by distance, then softened by snow and open air. The permitted quarry beyond the reserve boundary had scheduled a winter blast at 0700. Reuben already had the notice printed and folded in the chest pocket beside his field notebook. He still drove out to check the ridge. Trust, in his experience, was not the same thing as neglect. By the time he reached the eastern service track, the sun had lifted above the broken red shoulders of the hills. The quarry itself sat outside the setback line. Its warning logs were current. The access gate was marked. The blast matting was visible through binoculars. No workers had crossed the boundary. No fresh tracks cut into the protected soil. Reuben stood in the cold, notebook open, and made himself write the truth. No observed violation. The sentence felt heavier than it should have. There had been years when men accused him of wanting to find danger, because danger gave him purpose. They were wrong, but not entirely harmless in being wrong. A man could survive a false accusation and still feel it sitting somewhere under the ribs. Reuben had not come to North Candle Mesa to prove the quarry guilty. He had come because rock moved when winter loosened its grip, because snow hid cracks, and because a place did not have to be malicious to become unsafe. He capped his pencil. That was when he heard the dog. At first it was almost nothing, a broken sound under the wind. Reuben turned his head and waited. The mesa gave back its usual voices. A distant engine, grit sliding over stone. the thin whistle of air between juniper branches. Then it came again, a bark, weak and hoarse, from below ground level. Reuben moved toward the sound carefully. The blast had shaken loose a spill of sandstone fragments near a natural sinkhole just inside the reserve boundary. It was not a dramatic collapse, only a slumped rim, a half-moon of broken snow and red dust, enough to trap anything unlucky beneath it. He dropped to one knee and looked down. A German shepherd stood in the bottom of the rock pocket, large, black and gold, trembling from cold and exhaustion. Its coat was dusty with red grit and powdered snow. The saddle across its back was dark, almost charcoal, while its legs and chest carried a warm tan gold color. One ear stood upright. The other leaned slightly back, giving the animal an uneven, watchful expression. Its face was masked in black, but above the eyes, two small gold markings made the stare seem less fierce than deeply awake. The dog did not whine when Reuben appeared. It looked at him as if deciding what kind of man he was. "Easy," Reuben said. His voice did not echo much in the hole. Snow absorbed the edges of sound. He backed away, returned to the truck, and brought rope, a collapsible rescue sling, gloves, and a blanket. By instinct, he checked the anchor twice, then once more with a hard pull. Old habits could be mocked by people who had never depended on them. When he came back to the edge, the dog had not moved. "No collar tag," Reuben murmured, seeing the old leather strap around its neck. "No help from you there." The shepherd blinked. Reuben took that as permission to continue talking. "I'm going to come down. You don't have to like me. You just have to not make this stupid." He descended slowly. The slope was short but awkward, all loose stone and hidden ice. When his boots touched the bottom, the dog stepped back until its hindquarters brushed the rock wall. It did not bare teeth. It did not welcome him either. Reuben stopped 6 feet away and lowered himself to sit on a flat stone. There were faster ways. There were stronger ways. He had used stronger ways in another life, under orders, under noise, under lights that made every human shape look temporary. But this was not that life. This was a cold animal in a hole, and trust could not be dragged up by the neck, so he waited. The dog watched his hands, then his face, then the rope. "You know," Reuben said quietly, "I had other plans this morning." The shepherd shivered hard once, then took a single step forward. Reuben did not reach. Another step, then another. When the dog finally lowered its head enough to smell his glove, Reuben felt something inside him loosen with a discomfort, almost like grief. Not because the animal had trusted him, because it had taken so little kindness to earn a chance at being trusted. He slipped the sling under the dog's chest and belly. The shepherd stiffened but did not fight. Getting out was slow, ugly work. Stone scraping under boots, rope cutting into gloves, the dog slipping once, then pushing hard with a sudden offended determination that nearly made Reuben laugh. "Good," he grunted. "That's it. Be stubborn. Stubborn gets useful up here." When they reached the rim, Reuben rolled onto his back in the snow, breathing hard. The dog stood beside him, legs shaking, head low. For several seconds, neither of them did anything heroic. Then the shepherd turned away from the truck. Reuben sat up. The dog stared north, toward the higher cliffs where the closure signs marked the protected zone. Above those cliffs, a large dark bird circled on a thermal, steady as a thought that refused to leave. The shepherd lifted its head and watched the bird with an intensity Reuben could not explain. Not fear, not hunger, recognition maybe, or memory. Reuben looked from the bird to the dog's black and gold body, the uneven ear, the pale crescent of fur just visible on its chest where the snow had melted. "Condor," he said. The dog flicked its good ear. "Not accurate," Reuben admitted, "but neither am I most days." Condor did not come willingly to the truck at first. He stood his ground, still watching the sky, until Reuben wrapped the blanket around him and waited again. Eventually, the dog allowed himself to be guided into the passenger side, where he sat upright instead of lying down, like a weary guard refusing to go off shift. They were halfway back to the station when Reuben saw the vans. 2 matte black adventure vehicles were parked near the western trailhead, just below a seasonal closure sign bright enough to be seen from the road. A group of adult tourists stood in expensive winter climbing gear, laughing while someone adjusted a helmet camera. At the center of them was a man in a rust-orange puffer vest and black technical hoodie, lean, sharp-faced, smiling like the world was filming him. Dax Farrow. Reuben had seen the name on permit applications, promotional clips, and one complaint from a volunteer who said Red Needle Ascents treated protected land like a backdrop. Reuben parked. Condor remained in the truck, eyes following. Dax looked over before Reuben reached the sign. "Morning, Ranger." "Trail is closed," Reuben said, "for nesting season that hasn't started yet." Dax spread his hands for the benefit of his clients. "We're staying on rock, no harm done. The closure is active." A woman in a blue helmet glanced uncertainly at the sign. Dax saw the doubt and stepped into it with practiced ease. "This is what happens when people confuse stewardship with ownership," he said. "Some folks see open country and feel a need to lock it up." Reuben took out his field notebook. Dax's smile sharpened. "You always write people up before talking to them, or is that a military thing?" The group went quieter. Reuben photographed the vans, the sign, the boot tracks near the closed approach, and the GPS reading on his handheld unit. His face did not change. That disappointed Dax. Men like Dax preferred an argument because an argument could be edited into content. "You are being instructed to turn back," Reuben said. "All clients return to the vehicles. Any further access will be documented as a violation of the seasonal closure." Dax leaned closer, lowering his voice just enough to sound personal while still being heard. "You know what people say about you? They say you're the guy who sees a crisis in every footprint." Reuben looked at him then, not angrily, not coldly. Only long enough for Dax to understand that the sentence had landed somewhere real and failed to move him. "Turn back," Reuben said. Dax held the moment, then laughed and clapped his hands once. "All right, folks, we'll pivot." Plenty of legal ways to have fun. The tourists drifted back toward the vans, some embarrassed, some annoyed. Dax gave Reuben a little two-finger salute before climbing in. Reuben stood until the vehicles left. Only then did he return to the truck. Condor was still sitting upright, watching him through the windshield. There was no judgment in the dog's expression. That made it harder to ignore. At the veterinary intake office in town, the technician scanned Condor twice. The first pass found nothing. The second picked up an old chip registered to a rescue organization that had shut down 3 years earlier. The listed phone number no longer worked. County Animal Services authorized a temporary foster hold while they searched for a lawful owner. "Temporary," the technician said. Reuben nodded. Understood. He did understand. That did not stop him from buying plain food, a water bowl, and a heavy mat on the way back to the cabin. By evening, snow began again in light grains, tapping the window and dusting the porch rail. Condor drank, ate slowly, and ignored the mat near the stove. Instead, he settled facing the west window, body low, head up, one ear angled toward the northern cliffs. Reuben sat at the small table and wrote his report on Dax Farrow and Red Needle Ascents. He attached photographs, coordinates, closure references, and the time of the encounter. He used plain language. Plain language, he had learned, was harder to bury, though not impossible. Condor lifted his head when a faint cry crossed the dark outside. A raptor somewhere beyond the cabin. The dog did not bark. He only listened. Reuben looked at him over the top of the laptop. "You hear it too," he said. Condor's amber eyes stayed on the glass. Hours later, the reply to Reuben's report arrived from the state office. It was brief, polished, and almost painfully civil. The matter had been received. The incident would not be handled locally at this time. It was pending broader recreational access review. Reuben read the line once, then again. At the bottom sat the digital signature of a man he had never met. Orson Bellamy, Deputy Director. Reuben leaned back in the chair. The cabin was warm, the dog alive, the door locked, the night quiet except for wind moving over snow and stone. Still, something old in him recognized the shape of the words. They were the kind that did not deny danger. They simply gave danger somewhere comfortable to wait. Snow returned every morning in small, quiet amounts. It did not fall with drama. It came before sunrise, soft as ash, settling on the red ledges and the backs of juniper branches, covering boot prints just enough to make the mesa look forgiven. By noon, the sun would loosen it from the south-facing stone. Water would run in thin, shining lines down sandstone cracks, then freeze again after dusk. North Candle Mesa kept remaking itself in small ways. Reuben Slate distrusted places that changed that quietly. Condor went back to the veterinary intake office 2 days after the rescue. He rode in the passenger seat again, upright and watchful, refusing the back like a matter of principle. The technician scanned him a third time, checked the old chip number, and made 2 calls that ended in disconnected tones. The rescue organization attached to the chip had closed 3 years ago. The last listed adopter had no current address. County Animal Services put Condor on a hold while they searched for a lawful owner. Temporary foster, the technician said, filling out the form. Reuben signed where she pointed. Understood. Condor stood beside his boot, head level with the counter, amber eyes following the movement of the pen. Temporary should have made the arrangement simpler. A temporary animal did not require a future. A temporary animal could not accuse a man of attachment. If someone claimed Condor tomorrow, Reuben could hand over the leash, watch the truck leave, and return to the cabin with 1 bowl less by the stove. That was what he told himself. That evening, he bought a better lead anyway. Not the cheapest one, not the expensive one with reflective stitching and too much optimism. A plain black lead with a strong clip and no bright branding. He stood in the store aisle longer than necessary, then paid cash and left before the clerk could ask questions. Condor accepted the new lead without ceremony. Back at the cabin, he sniffed it once and sat by the west window. "You're welcome," Reuben said. The dog did not look at him. By the end of the week, Reuben had 3 new reports on red needle ascents. Dax Farrow did not always cross the closure line. That was the first thing Reuben noticed. Sometimes Dax brought clients close enough to test the boundary, close enough to photograph the sign, close enough to post a caption about public land and overreach, but not far enough to make enforcement easy. Other times he stepped over with theatrical carelessness, then turned back before Reuben arrived. On 2 occasions, he led clients into the western approach while Reuben's assigned patrol route sat on the eastern service track. It might have been coincidence. Reuben wrote that possibility down. Coincidence, he had learned, became more useful when treated like a suspect instead of a conclusion. The strange part was timing. Dax appeared whenever Reuben was least useful where he had been sent. When Reuben drove west to document the disturbance, the eastern service road sat unwatched. When he ignored Dax and stayed east, Dax posted public clips showing clients laughing near closed signs, making the reserve staff look either careless or controlling. Dax was either very lucky or being pointed. Reuben did not like either option. He sent the pattern to Paige Calder on a cold Thursday afternoon. He included photographs, timestamps, GPS points, vehicle plates, and short notes without speculation. The reply came 20 minutes later. "Call me." Paige Calder answered on the first ring. Her voice had the flat patience of someone who spent too much of her working life listening to people explain why rules should bend around their mood. "Slate," she said, "are you reporting violations or asking me to bless a theory?" "Reporting a pattern. Patterns are theories wearing better boots." Reuben looked through the cabin window. Condor was outside on the porch watching snow slide from the roof in small sheets. "I'm not pursuing him," Reuben said. "I'm documenting the pattern." "Good. Keep doing that. Do not chase him off-route if he leaves the closure. Do not follow client vehicles onto county roads. Do not interview his customers like you have a badge. I know what my contract says. I'm sure you do. I also know what men do when they think a slow system is about to lose something important." That made Reuben stop. Paige did not soften the silence. He respected her more for it. She was BLM Law Enforcement 49, compact and steady, with short dark hair already threaded with silver and a way of speaking that placed every word where it belonged. Reuben had met her only twice in person. She wore the green and tan uniform like it was work clothing, not identity, and kept a roll of pink flagging tape, clipped to her belt even indoors. Nothing about her seemed decorative. "I'll stay inside my lane," Reuben said. "Your lane is useful," Paige replied. "Do not make it smaller by stepping out of it." After the call ended, Reuben remained at the table with the phone in his hand. Condor scratched once at the door. Reuben opened it. The dog came in, carrying cold air on his coat, shook snow from his shoulders, and walked straight to the mat near the stove. For the first time since the rescue, he lay down without facing the door. Reuben stood there longer than he meant to. The cabin did not become home because a dog chose a mat. He knew that. A man could survive many years by refusing to let small things become declarations. Still, the room looked different with Condor asleep in it. On Saturday, the weather cleared. The sky went hard blue, and the snow on the mesa reflected so much light that Reuben wore his tinted field glasses even when the sun sat low. Condor walked on the long lead beside him, not pulling, not wandering. He had the purposeful gait of an animal that did not ask permission from the ground, but still knew what edges were. Reuben took the eastern service track first, then cut along a narrow conservation path below the north-facing cliff band. The seasonal closure signs stood clean and bright. Wind had drifted snow against their posts. No fresh boot tracks crossed the first boundary. No tire marks ran beyond the service gate. A normal patrol. Normal lasted until Condor stopped. The dog did not bark. He did not dig. He simply slowed, nose lifted, then turned toward a shadowed break in the sandstone where a shelf of rock overhung a pocket of snow and brush. Reuben gave him 6 feet of lead. Condor moved carefully, head low now. He sniffed the base of the rock, then the wind, then a patch of disturbed snow under the ledge. His ears changed first. The good one came forward. The damaged one angled back, giving him the look of an animal listening in 2 directions at once. "What do you have?" Condor did not answer in any way that could be turned into certainty. That mattered. Reuben crouched outside the ledge and studied the space before entering. The alcove was not a cave. It was a shallow handling pocket, naturally hidden from the main path by brush and rock shadow. Someone had used it and cleaned it badly. There was no dramatic discovery waiting in the center. No crate stacked in the open, no signed confession, no single object announcing what had happened there. Instead, the place held fragments that almost wanted to be dismissed. A broken strip from a collapsible transport crate, half buried under dirty snow. A few pale husks from quail feed near the rock wall, a length of synthetic cord, cedar bedding scattered thinly where it did not belong. 2 small metal bands cut cleanly and wedged deep in a crack beside the stone. Reuben felt the old instinct rise in his hand. Pick it up, confirm it, own it before someone else makes it disappear. His glove hovered over the nearest band. Then he saw, not the metal, but a training range under winter clouds years ago. He saw his own report printed cleanly, his warning folded into a file, his words made small by someone who called them incomplete. He remembered how easily the shape of truth could be changed when a man left even one careless fingerprint on it. Condor stood beside him, breathing slowly. Reuben withdrew his hand. "No," he said quietly. The dog looked at him. "Not this way." He backed out of the alcove, keeping his boots away from the center. From a distance he photographed the ledge, the approach, the disturbed snow, and the visible objects. He marked the GPS point, took a wider image showing relation to the service track, then another showing relation to the closed climbing spur. His notes stayed plain. Potential handling site. Possible wildlife-related materials observed. Seen not disturbed by reporting ranger. Then he called Paige. She arrived near dusk in a green agency truck, with snow dusting the hood and a coffee thermos wedged between field folders. When she stepped out, she did not ask whether he was sure. She looked at the sky, the slope, the boot prints, and the line Reuben had stopped behind. "You stayed out?" "Yes." Paige studied him for half a second. "Good." She pulled on gloves, set cones in the snow, and unspooled pink flagging tape with efficient motions. In the fading light, the tape looked almost absurd against the mesa. Too bright, too cheerful, like a child's ribbon tied around a serious thing. Paige used it to make boundaries real. Reuben understood that more than he expected to. Condor sat beside Reuben beyond the line. The dog's coat had gathered snow along the black saddle of his back. The pale crescent on his chest showed whenever he lifted his head toward the ledge. He did not pull forward. He did not try to claim the site. His work, if it could be called work, had ended the moment Reuben understood where to stop. Paige photographed everything before touching anything. Wide angle, mid-range, close, position relative to the ledge, position relative to the boundary. She marked each item, bagged the broken crate strip, collected the feed husks, lifted a small sample of cedar bedding, and used forceps to remove the cut bands from the crack. "No promises," she said while writing the evidence log. "I didn't ask for one. No, but people hear sirens in their head once evidence bags come out." There were no sirens. Paige glanced at him. That's either discipline or damage. Sometimes they use the same tools. That almost earned a smile. Not quite. The light drained out of the mesa slowly. The red rock darkened first, then the snow turned blue, then the junipers became black shapes against the last line of sun. Reuben remained outside the taped boundary, while Paige finished the chain of custody form. His hands were cold inside his gloves. He did not move closer. When Paige finally sealed the last bag, she stood with the field folder tucked under one arm. "You know," she said, "this may turn out to be nothing. Old falconry junk, improper storage, some consultant being sloppy. I know. And if it becomes something through process. Not because you found it. Not because the dog stopped. Because the pieces hold." Reuben looked at Condor. The dog was watching Paige now, calm and alert, as if he had accepted her into the shape of the evening. "Understood," Reuben said. Paige started toward her truck, then paused. "For what it's worth," she said without turning it sentimental. "This time you did it the right way." The words landed gently. That was the problem. Reuben had been hit harder by kinder things. He watched Paige's taillights fade down the service track, red dots moving through the snow-shadowed road. Condor stood and pressed his shoulder lightly against Reuben's leg. Reuben did not reach down at first. Then he did. His gloved hand rested on the dog's neck while the mesa went quiet around them. The last time he had believed he was doing something the right way, the record had learned how to forget him. This time, the evidence left in another person's truck. The cut bands changed the temperature of the room, not literally. The auxiliary station was still heated by an old wall unit that clicked every 9 minutes and smelled faintly of dust whenever it woke. Outside, North Candle Mesa lay bright under a clean winter sky. Snow gathered in pale seams along the red cliffs. A raven walked across the parking area like an old judge inspecting a failed argument. But inside, after Paige Calder placed the sealed evidence bags on the metal table, the air seemed to tighten. Reuben Slate stood near the window with Condor beside him. The German shepherd had learned the station's sounds by now. Radio static, boot steps, drawer slides, the electric hum of the printer. He no longer rose for every noise. He watched instead, head level, one ear forward, and the damaged one tipped back, as if listening to both the room and the mesa beyond it. Paige did not dramatize the evidence. That was one of the things Reuben had begun to respect about her. She laid the bags out in order, each labeled, timed, and signed. Broken crate strip, feed husks, cedar bedding sample, synthetic cord, 2 cut metal identification bands. Possible wildlife handling site, Paige said. Not a conclusion. Reuben nodded. I wrote it the same way. I saw. That was all she gave him. At 10:17 a.m., a gray federal SUV pulled up outside the station. A woman stepped out carrying a burgundy leather folder beneath one arm and a winter coat zipped to the throat. She moved without wasted effort, not hurried, not slow. Her black hair was cut just below the jaw and tucked neatly behind one ear. A small scar marked the skin near her chin, the kind that did not ask to be explained. Special Agent Dana Vickers, Paige said when the woman entered. U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service. Dana shook Paige's hand first, then she turned to Reuben. You're Slate. Yes, Mom. Her eyes moved briefly to Condor, then back to him. No smile, no comment about the dog, no soft line about the rescue. Show me the original images, she said. Reuben had expected questions. He had not expected that to be the first one. He opened his laptop and brought up the files. Dana did not sit until she had seen the folder names, timestamps, and metadata. She asked who touched what, where Reuben stood, what lens he used, whether any images had been compressed before being sent, how far Condor had entered the alcove, where Paige placed the tape, and whether anyone besides the 3 of them knew the location. Her questions were clean and merciless. After 20 minutes, Reuben felt something old in his shoulders begin to rise. Not anger exactly. Defense. The body's answer to being examined by someone who had not earned the right. Dana must have seen it. She looked up from the screen. You don't have to convince me you're right, she said. You have to help me build something that can survive people wanting you to be wrong. The words were not kind. That was why they reached him. Reuben had spent years wishing someone in authority had said something like that before deciding what his warning was worth. Not comfort, not belief. A structure strong enough to hold the truth without needing the person who carried it to be perfect. Condor shifted beside him and leaned once against his knee, not heavily, only enough to return him to the room. Reuben exhaled through his nose. "What else do you need?" he asked. Dana finally sat. By midday, Dr. Lenora Pike arrived from the university field office with windburn on her cheeks, binoculars against her chest, and a canvas satchel full of notebooks that looked ready to burst. She was 46, narrow-framed and quick-eyed, with reddish-brown hair pinned up badly by what appeared to be a pencil. She greeted the room with a distracted nod, then went straight to the evidence bags as if people were a weather condition she had learned to work around. "Cut bands?" she asked. Paige pointed. Lenora bent close without touching the plastic. Her expression changed by degrees. Interest first, then concern, then professional restraint. "Could be old," she said. "Could be sloppy disposal. Could be nothing." Dana watched her. "And if it isn't nothing?" Lenora straightened. "Then you are not looking for someone taking nestlings in February. That would be biologically absurd and operationally foolish." "Explain it like I'm not a bird person," Paige said. Lenora glanced at her, approved of the request, and took a marker to the whiteboard. "Late winter, known Aries, pre-breeding return, no current young." She drew a simple seasonal line: spring nesting, summer fledging, fall movement, winter holding. "If protected birds were taken from the wild last breeding season," Lenora said, "they could be held under some claimed rehabilitation, research, or captive management purpose. By winter, paperwork can make them look like something else entirely." "Laundered through permits," Dana said. Lenora's mouth tightened. "That is one way to put it." Reuben studied the whiteboard. The case shifted under his feet. He had been imagining a person on a cliff with a bag, a direct act, a simple violation. Lenora was describing something colder, a slow conversion of living creatures into acceptable paperwork. On the table, the bands sat in their evidence bags, small as coins. Dana opened the burgundy folder and removed a stack of permit summaries. Skyreach Raptor Initiative appears in the regional records. Authorized research activity, state cooperation, transport permissions for limited situations. Paige folded her arms. Skyreach has donors and photographs with half the county. "And permits," Dana said. "Real ones?" Reuben asked. Dana looked at him. "That's the problem. Real permits can tell lies if the people using them know where to bend the language." The station fell quiet. Outside, a vehicle passed on the county road, tires whispering over melting snow. Condor lifted his head, then settled again. Reuben watched the dog's ears and thought about how animals did not understand paperwork. They understood doors, hands, hunger, cold, fear, and the difference between being held and being trapped. Humans had invented more elegant cages. The first name to matter was not Tessa Kincaid. It was Dr. Hollis Fenwick. Dana called him on speaker from the station table, after confirming his number through federal records. The line rang 6 times before an older man answered with a voice like dry grass. "Fenwick! Dr. Fenwick! This is Special Agent Dana Vickers with U.S. Fish and Wildlife. I'm calling to confirm receipt records for 3 peregrine transfers listed under your facility last September." A pause. "I didn't receive any peregrines last September." Dana did not react. "I can read you the listed band numbers." "Read them." She did. On the other end, something scraped, perhaps a chair. Papers shifted. The man breathed once through his nose, annoyed before frightened. "No," Hollis said. "No, those never came here. The record shows electronic acknowledgement under your name." "Then the record is wearing my name without permission." Lenora's eyes sharpened. Dana's pen moved across a yellow pad. "You're certain? I run a 3-building rehabilitation center on a hill that smells like quail, antiseptic, and weathered pine," Hollis said. "I know every bird that comes through my doors. I know every volunteer who complains about cleaning after them. I did not receive those birds." His anger was not loud. That made it stronger. Reuben looked at the bags on the table again. A broken crate strip, feed husks, cedar, bands. Not a single proof by itself. Together they had begun to form a sentence. Dana thanked Hollis and arranged to speak with him again formally. When she ended the call, no one filled the silence immediately. Paige broke it first. "So we have possible false transfer records." "Possible," Dana said. Lenora tapped the board with the marker. "And if those birds were never received by Hollis, then either they went somewhere else, never existed, or existed under a different identity. "Birds don't get new identities by themselves," Reuben said. Dana looked at him. "No, people give them those." The next batch of records brought up the second name, Tessa Kincaid. It appeared in tidy digital type under several approval chains: Field Operations and Compliance, Research Transfer Review, Conditional Movement Authorization. Nothing theatrical, no red flags shouting from the page. Just a name in the right field, attached to the kind of paperwork most people trusted because it looked too boring to be dangerous. Reuben stared at it. Kincaid. The letters did not belong on that page. Not here. Not in a wildlife station in Utah with a rescued dog breathing beside his leg and cut bands lying under fluorescent light. Dana noticed. "You know her?" "No." "But you know the name." Reuben did not answer quickly enough. Paige shifted her attention to him but did not press. Lenora, less familiar with the rules of human silence, looked from face to face. Dana turned back to her folder. Tessa Kincaid, 38. Director of Field Operations and Compliance at Skyreach. Graduate work in wildlife biology. Father is Malcolm Kincaid, retired Navy commander. The room changed again. Not tighter this time, older. Reuben was no longer seeing the station. He was seeing snow under floodlights on a training range years before North Candle Mesa, before contract work, before the cabin and the dog, and the habit of making no promises longer than a season. He saw men moving through cold that had been called manageable because the schedule needed it to be manageable. He saw his own warning passed upward, then sideways, then softened, until it no longer had teeth. One man had paid the price in a way that did not belong in speeches, not publicly, not with blame anybody could hold. Reuben had written the complaint anyway. The final response had said the concern was not fully substantiated. A line had entered his record after that. Not a punishment, exactly. Punishments were easier to name. This was quieter, a professional shadow worded carefully enough to follow him without looking like it was chasing him, and Malcolm Kincaid had never spoken to him. Reuben blinked once and returned to the station. Condor was standing now. He had moved without sound, placing his body between Reuben and the table, not blocking anyone, only close enough that Reuben could feel warmth through his pant leg. Dana's voice lowered by 1 degree. "There is something else." Reuben looked at her. "In archived reference logs tied to your old case, there's a notation of a supplemental command endorsement memorandum from Commander Kincaid. It was not included in the final personnel package." Paige went very still. Reuben said nothing. Dana did not soften the fact by adding sympathy to it. "I have not seen the memorandum itself, only the reference notation, but the description indicates it addressed prior safety concerns and your submission timeline." The station wall unit clicked on. Warm air pushed dust into the room. Reuben could hear it too clearly. Malcolm had written something. Maybe not enough, maybe too late, maybe only to protect himself. But something. For years, Reuben had carried Malcolm's silence as a solid object. Heavy, yes, but shaped. Now Dana had placed a crack through it, and what came through was not relief. It was uncertainty. Uncertainty was harder to hold. If Malcolm had tried to help, why had Reuben never seen it? If a man did the right thing only until the system resisted, was that courage or paperwork? Dana closed the folder. "This does not change the wildlife case," she said. "No," Reuben replied, but it changed the air around it. That night, Dax Farrow posted the video. Reuben watched only because Paige sent the link with a warning. Don't engage. The clip was shot near the Western Closure sign. Dax stood in his rust-orange vest, face lit by winter sun and the polished confidence of a man speaking to followers instead of witnesses. "Public land belongs to the public," Dax said on the screen. "But lately, North Candle Mesa has a temporary ranger who sees a conspiracy in every footprint. Former SEAL, big notebook, bigger control issues. You tell me where stewardship ends and paranoia begins." The comments had already begun to fill. Some laughed, some agreed, some asked what Reuben was hiding. Others defended closures and were drowned beneath brighter voices. Reuben set the phone face down. The cabin seemed quieter than before, though the stove was working, and the wind dragged snow lightly against the window. Condor stood near the door, not looking at the phone, not looking toward the mesa. He looked at Reuben. There was no accusation in the dog's face, no demand, only attention. That was harder to ignore than anger would have been. Reuben had spent years learning how to disappear without leaving a room. Lower the voice. Shorten the answer. Stop explaining. Let people think what saved them effort. Condor watched him as if the choice were visible. Reuben stood, crossed to the small desk and opened his field notebook. He wrote the date, the time, the existence of the video, the exact wording Dax had used as closely as he remembered it. Then he wrote one more line. Do not answer noise with noise. Condor came away from the door and lay down beside the desk. Outside, North Candle Mesa vanished into winter dark. Somewhere beyond it, a permit file carried the name Kincaid. Somewhere behind that name, an old memorandum might still exist. Reuben rested his hand on the notebook. For the first time in years, the past had not come back as a verdict. It had come back as evidence. The Skyreach Raptor Initiative field station did not look like a place built to hide anything. It sat on a clean rise east of North Candle Mesa, where the snow was brighter than the stone, and the morning sun turned every window pale gold. The building was long, low, and tasteful, made of weathered cedar and glass, with a small weather tower on the roof and a row of outdoor perches standing empty beneath the winter sky. A sign by the entrance showed a stylized falcon wing above the words Research, Rescue, Return. Reuben Slate stood beside Dana Vickers at the gate and read the words twice. Condor waited at his left knee, wearing the dark olive harness Reuben had bought after the county hold was extended. The dog was calmer here than Reuben expected. He did not pull toward the perches. He did not bark at the unfamiliar building. He only lifted his nose once, caught the air, and looked toward the storage sheds behind the station. Let him stay close, Dana said. Reuben glanced at her. Dana kept her eyes on the building. Close is not the same as loose. That was the closest she had come to kindness. A woman stepped out before they reached the door. Tessa Kincaid looked younger than the name felt to Reuben. 38, perhaps, with chestnut-brown hair tied low at the back of her neck and a clean slate-blue softshell zipped over a cream base layer. Her boots were field boots, not office boots, though they were cleaner than Reuben's. A metal hair clip shaped like a falcon wing caught the light when she turned her head. She took in Dana first, then Reuben, then Condor. Her face was controlled, not cold. There was intelligence in it, and more than a little impatience. "Special Agent Vickers," she said. "You asked for a compliance review meeting. I cleared 2 hours." Dana shook her hand. "We may need less. We may need more." Tessa's eyes moved to Reuben. "And Mr. Slate is here in what capacity?" "Field reporting witness," Dana said. "He documented the initial sight." Tessa accepted that, but not warmly. "I understand there have been concerns." Reuben said nothing. That seemed to bother her more than an accusation would have. Inside, the station smelled of coffee, disinfectant, paper, and something faintly wild beneath all of it. Feathers, feed, weathered wood. The meeting room overlooked the snowy wash below the ridge. On one wall hung photographs of released birds, donor events, student volunteers, and field crews standing under wide skies. In the largest photograph, a silver-haired man in a forest green quilted jacket held a gloved hand near a hooded falcon. His smile was measured and generous, the kind made for donors and local newspapers. Tessa saw Reuben looking. "Blaine Garrison," she said, "our founder and executive director." Dana placed her burgundy folder on the table. "Will Mr. Garrisons be joining us?" "He's in Salt Lake with donors," Tessa said. "I can answer compliance questions." Dana sat. "Good." For the first 15 minutes, Tessa answered everything as if the questions had administrative solutions. Skyreach conducted legitimate research. Skyreach supported injured raptors. Skyreach trained volunteers and assisted state wildlife offices with nest monitoring. Skyreach operated under real permits, real reporting schedules, and real constraints. If a form looked odd, there was probably context. If a transfer code appeared narrow, the full file would explain it. She did not sound like a liar. That made the conversation harder. "We are not accusing Skyreach of having no lawful purpose," Dana said. "Then I hope we can be careful with tone," Tessa replied. "A small nonprofit can be damaged by suggestion alone." Paige Calder, who had arrived separately and taken a seat near the door, looked up from her notebook. "A mesa can be damaged by people treating suggestion like damage and damage like paperwork." Tessa looked at her then, and for the first time the polish thinned. Dana slid 3 printed records across the table. These transfers list Dr. Hollis Fenwick's facility as recipient. Tessa glanced at the pages. Hollis is difficult, but licensed. He says he never received these birds. Tessa's eyes stopped moving. He also says the electronic acknowledgement under his name is not his. The room held still. Outside, a gust of wind lifted powder snow from the wash and carried it sideways in a white veil. Condor, lying beside Reuben's chair, raised his head, not toward Tessa, toward the hallway behind them. Tessa recovered quickly, but not completely. Then there may be a clerical issue in the transfer chain. Dana's voice remained even. 3 times. That is why I said issue, not typo. Who has authority to alter recipient fields after your approval? Tessa looked down again. A single page had become heavier than the rest. There are secondary compliance credentials, she said. Used when I'm in the field or when time-sensitive transfers need completion. Who manages those? My office. Who uses them? Tessa did not answer at once. The confidence in her face did not collapse. It adjusted. Reuben had seen that in good officers and bad ones. The moment when a person realized the map in their head no longer matched the ground. Normally, my assistant handles preliminary routing, she said. I review. If Blaine has already approved an operational movement, I sign off on compliance scope. Reuben spoke for the first time. Because you trust him. Tessa turned toward him. Yes, she said. Because he built this organization. Because half the birds on that wall lived because Skyreach existed. Because donors do not fund empty ideals, Mr. Slate. They fund outcomes. And paperwork makes outcomes look clean. Her eyes sharpened. You think fences and signs are conservation. Some of us have to keep programs alive after the field notes are written. Reuben leaned back slightly. He did not take the bait. Dana watched both of them and let the silence work. Tessa looked back to the records. Send me the band numbers and I'll audit the logs. Dana tapped the copies already on the table. These are the numbers. For the first time, Tessa seemed to understand that the meeting had not come to ask for permission. It had brought a mirror. While Dana stayed with Tessa in the meeting room, Paige took a call in the hallway. Reuben heard only pieces through the half-open door. Red Needle, consulting invoice, route development, subsidiary account. Paige came back 10 minutes later with a look that made Reuben straighten. Dax Farrow received payments from a company called Rimline Outdoor Strategy, she said. Rimline's mailing address matches a vendor used by Skyreach for recreational access assessments. Tessa frowned. We have never hired Dax Farrow for field research. No, Paige said. The invoice says route development consulting. That would go through outreach planning. Who oversees outreach planning? Tessa's mouth closed. Dana made a note without looking up. Mr. Garrison? Tessa did not confirm. She did not deny it either. Paige continued. Dax says he was told Skyreach wanted to identify future adventure tour partnerships if the closure map changed. He admits he pushed the west approaches because those routes photographed well. That doesn't connect to bird transfers, Tessa said. No, Paige replied. It connects to distraction. The word settled into the room. Tessa folded her hands. Reuben noticed she pressed her thumb against the falcon wing hair clip she had removed and set beside her papers. The gesture was small, private, and quickly stopped. That was the moment Reuben began to dislike the shape of the case more deeply. It would have been easier if Tessa had been smug and empty. Easier if Skyreach had been a front with no good work attached to it. But the walls were covered in real birds, real releases, real volunteers with cold reddened faces smiling beside cardboard carriers. Good things had happened here, and perhaps that was how the wrong things had survived. People defended the good work first. Then they stopped looking too closely at what stood behind it. Condor rose and crossed the room. Reuben's hand moved instinctively to the lead, but the dog did not go toward Tessa. He walked to the space between Dana and Paige, turned once, and lay down there with a quiet exhale. Reuben stared at him. It should not have mattered. A dog choosing a patch of floor was not a verdict on anything. Yet something in Reuben tightened before he could stop it. Condor had slept by his door, ridden in his truck, followed his boot tracks through snow. For one foolish second, Reuben felt left. Then Condor lifted his eyes to him. Not away. Just from somewhere else. The understanding came without comfort. Loyalty was not ownership. Safety was not a room with only one door. Maybe the dog had known that before Reuben did. Dana noticed, of course. Dana noticed too much. She said nothing. Tessa opened her laptop and began pulling internal access logs. At first her keystrokes were brisk, then slower. She entered a search, re-entered it, checked a date against the printed transfer record. "There are secondary credential uses here," she said. Dana leaned forward. "Under whose authorization?" "Mine, technically. Technically, they were issued through my office." Tessa's voice had lost some of its edge. "But this one was used when I was in Oregon for a release event." Paige asked, "Could someone have used your remote token? If they had the delegated credential and internal approval queue access, yes. Who would have that?" Tessa looked toward the photograph of Blaine Garrison on the wall. She did not say his name. She did not need to. The meeting did not end with confession. It ended the way real trouble often did, with copied logs, preserved emails, formal requests, and people leaving a room more careful than they had entered it. Dana told Tessa not to alter, delete, or correct any file without instruction. Paige documented the payment connection separately. Tessa agreed to provide a controlled export of the access logs through counsel if necessary, though she bristled at the word counsel as if it made the room colder. As they stepped outside, the light had begun to tilt toward late afternoon. Snow shone on the mesa. The empty perches cast thin shadows on the ground. Tessa followed them to the gate. "Mr. Slate," she said. Reuben stopped. Dana and Paige continued a few steps, giving the conversation space without leaving it unwitnessed. Condor stood at Reuben's side. Tessa looked different outside, less certain, more like a woman standing between the building she had defended and the ground that might not defend her back. "My father," she said. "Did he ever apologize to you?" Reuben felt the question move through him before he understood what it had touched. He thought of Malcolm Kincaid's name on old documents, a memorandum no one had shown him, a silence he had mistaken for absence, because no one had bothered to tell him it was more complicated than that. He could have punished her with the answer. He did not. "Not in a way I could hear," he said. Tessa looked down at the snow between them. For the first time that day she had no prepared response. Reuben turned toward the truck. Condor moved with him, then paused once to look back at the Skyreach building, its glass bright in the winter sun, its walls full of photographs of good work that might not be enough to save it. Behind them, Tessa remained by the gate. The Falcon wing clip was still in her hand. The first letter did not accuse Reuben Slate of lying. That would have been too crude, and whoever wrote it understood the usefulness of polish. It arrived by email to the reserve contractor at 8:12 on Monday morning, copied to the state liaison office with Skyreach Raptor Initiative's legal counsel listed in the header. By 8:31, Paige Calder had a copy. By 8:46, Dana Vickers had called Reuben and told him not to respond to anyone until she arrived. Reuben read it anyway. The document was 6 pages long and careful enough to be dangerous. It stated that Skyreach respected lawful oversight, supported responsible conservation, and welcomed transparent review. Then it shifted, smoothly, into concern. Concern about a temporary field ranger exceeding the scope of a seasonal contract. Concern about reputational harm to a non-profit organization. Concern about whether one individual's pattern of escalating safety-related disputes had influenced the handling of routine field observations. There was no need to name the Old Navy complaint directly. The words had found a cleaner way to point at it. Reuben sat at the cabin table with the laptop open, Condor lying near his boots. Snowlight filled the room, turning the walls pale and making the stove glass glow less than usual. The dog's ears moved at small sounds outside, but his eyes stayed on Reuben. Pattern, escalating, disputes. Those words had been taken from somewhere, not from memory, not from rumor, from a file. Reuben scrolled lower and saw a phrase that made the back of his neck grow still. Prior personnel suitability materials indicate documented concerns regarding Mr. Slate's tendency to interpret operational disagreement as institutional negligence. He closed the laptop. For a moment, the cabin had no sound except the wind pressing snow against the west window. That sentence was not a lie in the way a man could grab by the throat. It was worse. It had been built from real fragments, shaved down until context bled out, his old complaint. The internal conclusion, the bureaucratic shadow that had followed him after he left the Navy. Nothing private enough to be obviously illegal on its face. Nothing public enough to be honest in how it was used. Somebody had opened a door in his personnel packet, and then handed what was inside to people who knew exactly where to cut. By noon, the reserve's contract administrator asked to meet by video. Her name was Elise Branwell, a thin woman in her early 60s with silver hair pulled back in a low knot and reading glasses on a chain. Reuben had met her only once during onboarding. She was not unkind. That made the conversation harder. "Reuben," Elise said, "this is not a termination notice." "Understood. It is a review." "Understood." She looked pained by how little he gave her. "The concern is optics as much as substance. You were the first reporting party. You have prior conflict language now being raised. Skyreach is already suggesting personal motivation. I documented a site. Paige collected the evidence. I know that. Dana is leading the wildlife case. I know that too." Elise removed her glasses and set them down. Knowing something and keeping the organization from being pulled into a credibility fight are not the same problem. There it was again. Not disbelief. Management. Reuben almost preferred disbelief. Disbelief had a face. "Do I still have a job?" he asked. "For now, yes. But I'm asking you to step back from any field activity connected to Skyreach, Red Needle, or the Eastern Service Track until this is sorted." Condor rose before Reuben did. The dog did not bark. He simply stood, slow and alert, as if some change in the air had become visible. Reuben looked at him and then back at the screen. "Yes, Mom," he said. After the call ended, he remained seated. His hands were calm. That surprised him. Years before, after the Navy complaint was narrowed into something easier to dismiss, he had imagined anger would always arrive loudly, if the same kind of thing happened again. It did not. It came as order, as a sequence of practical thoughts too cold to trust. Copy everything. Move the original notes. Check access logs. Drive the Eastern Service Road tonight before they clear whatever is there. Do not wait for permission. Condor stood by the door. Reuben took his field jacket from the hook. The dog did not move toward the truck keys on the table. He did not follow Reuben to the door. Instead, he planted himself in front of it, broad shoulders blocking the way, one ear forward and one tipped back. His amber eyes were not dramatic. They were worse than dramatic. They were familiar. Reuben clipped the lead to the harness. "Move." Condor did not. "You are not a committee." The dog remained where he was. Reuben's mouth tightened. He reached for the door handle anyway, and Condor stepped closer until Reuben would have had to push past him. Not hard, not aggressive, just present. Reuben felt the old machinery inside him falter. He had been about to do exactly what the letter wanted him to do, become the man in their version, the man who could not wait, the man who trusted no one, the man who made the case small enough to fit inside his own damage. His phone buzzed. "Dana," he answered without taking his eyes off the dog. "Do not go anywhere alone," she said. Reuben closed his eyes briefly. "Paige call you? No, you got quiet. That an investigative technique? It is with men who think silence is a plan." Condor leaned his weight lightly against Reuben's shin. Dana continued. "They are trying to make the case about you. Do not help them. I have field notes they haven't seen. Then copy them. I have original images. Duplicate them with hash logs. I have route observations. Send them to Paige, Lenora, Hollis, and me. All of it." Reuben opened his eyes. Dana's voice did not soften. "If the evidence only lives in your hands, they only have to discredit your hands." The sentence entered him cleanly. Not like comfort, like instruction. By evening, the auxiliary station became a place of quiet transfer. Paige arrived first, carrying a portable drive and a stack of evidence continuity forms. Dana came next, snow-dusting her dark parka, the burgundy folder tucked beneath her arm. Dr. Lenora Pike joined by video from her field office, hair pinned badly as usual, a mug of tea steaming beside a tower of breeding maps. Hollis Fenwick called in from his rehabilitation center, where something rustled in the background and he occasionally paused to tell an unseen volunteer not to overfill a dish. Reuben laid everything out: field notes, original photographs, GPS logs, time-stamped route observations, copies of reports, screenshots of Dax's post, the initial quarry blast notice showing no violation, the response signed by Orson Bellamy, the Skyreach letter. He did not editorialize. That was the hard part. Every time he wanted to explain what something meant, Dana asked for the file name. Every time he wanted to describe the pattern, Paige asked for the time range. Every time he wanted to say they were doing it again, Lenora asked which they he meant and whether it belonged in a note or in his head. It should have angered him. Instead, after the first hour, it began to steady him. The truth did not become smaller when other people touched it. It became less easy to bury. At 9:18 p.m., Reuben handed Dana the last drive. "No evidence gets to live only in my hands," he said. Dana looked at him for a long moment. Good, no praise, no speech. Good was enough. Condor had spent most of the evening under the table, his body stretched between Reuben's boots and Paige's chair. At one point he rested his head on Dana's boot, as if the federal government had become temporarily acceptable. Dana noticed, looked down, and returned to writing without comment. Later, when everyone was packing up, Paige held the Skyreach letter by one corner. "Bellamy had access to your suitability packet through the contractor channel," she said. "Not the whole military record. Enough to misuse. Can we prove he sent it? Not yet. Will you look?" Paige's expression was dry. "Slate, I was offended before you asked." For the first time that day, Reuben almost smiled. While Reuben was being narrowed into a problem, Tessa Kincaid was discovering the shape of one. She did not call Dana directly at first. The message came through an attorney just before midnight, formal and careful. Tessa was willing to preserve and provide certain internal Skyreach access logs under controlled conditions. She requested that all communication be documented. She also requested clarification that cooperation would not be treated as immunity. Dana read that line twice at the station table the next morning. "She knows," Paige said. "She suspects," Dana corrected. Lenora, on speaker, sounded half awake and fully impatient. "What did she find?" Dana opened the attached summary. Credential use after approval. Destination fields altered post-signature. Secondary compliance access tied to Tessa's office, while Tessa was physically in Oregon for a documented release event. Internal note, BG reviewed. Expedite. No one had to ask who BG was. Blaine Garrison had still not appeared in person. His absence was becoming one of the louder things in the case. By afternoon, Dana arranged a recorded preliminary meeting with Tessa's attorney present. Tessa appeared on screen in a dark parka, no Skyreach logo visible, her hair clipped back with the Falcon wing pin she kept touching as if it had grown heavier. "I signed some of the compliance approvals," she said. Dana sat across from the screen, still as stone. "Did you understand the final destination of the birds listed in those approvals?" "I understood what the file said. That was not my question." Tessa swallowed. "No, I did not understand the final destination. Did you ever authorize anyone to use your delegated credential while you were out of state?" "No." "Did you know Dr. Hollis Fenwick's name was attached to transfers he says he never received?" "No." "Are you claiming no responsibility?" Tessa looked down. That answer took longer. "No," she said finally. "I am not claiming that." Reuben, standing near the back wall, respected her more for that than he wanted to. Dana's face did not change. Cooperation does not erase signatures. "I know. Good." Tessa nodded once, small and stiff. "There is something else." Everyone waited. The shipment listed for tomorrow morning was modified 26 minutes after our counsel notified Skyreach of a document preservation request. Dana leaned forward. "Modified how?" "Moved up," Tessa said. "Tonight." The destination code was shortened, but the attached logistics note references a private airfield outside Cedar Basin. Paige was already reaching for her phone. Tessa looked at Reuben then, not Dana. "I thought if we made the work look legitimate enough, people would leave it alone," she said. "I didn't understand that looking legitimate was the point." Outside, the wind struck the station hard enough to rattle the window. Lenora's voice came through the speaker, thinner now. "Weather alert just updated. Cold front is early." Paige checked her phone. Ground blizzard warning for the Mesa corridor after midnight. Dana closed the folder. No one had waited for weather. No one had chosen a storm for drama. The storm had arrived because winter did not care what human beings were trying to finish, and someone at Skyreach had decided to run before the paperwork caught up. Reuben looked down at Condor. The dog was awake, eyes fixed on the dark window, ears tuned to wind moving over snow and stone. For once, Reuben did not reach for his keys. He waited for Dana to speak first. The morning was too beautiful to trust. Sunlight spread over North Candle Mesa in a thin gold sheet, touching the red stone, the white snow, the black-green junipers, and the long shadows of winter cliffs. The air looked clear enough to cut. Every ledge seemed closer than it was, every distance simplified by brightness. Reuben Slate stood beside the auxiliary station truck and watched the sky. Condor sat at his left, harness clipped, black and gold coat shining where snowlight caught the tan along his chest. The dog looked toward the Eastern Service Road, then toward Reuben, then back again. He did not seem restless, only ready. Across the lot, Dana Vickers was speaking with two federal officers beside a gray SUV. Paige Calder moved between vehicles with a map case under one arm and pink flagging tape hooked at her belt. No one raised their voice. No one hurried for the sake of looking urgent. The quiet made the morning feel more serious. The warrant had come through before dawn. Tessa Kincaid's access logs, Hollis Fenwick's formal statement, Paige's chain of custody, Lenora Pike's biological analysis, and Dana's permit review had finally formed enough weight to move the law. Not perfectly, not comfortably, but enough. The target was a satellite rehabilitation and transport barn listed under a Skyreach-affiliated operating permit, tucked near a service spur northeast of the reserve boundary. On paper, it was a lawful facility, temporary quarantine, veterinary staging, transfer preparation. It was the kind of place no one would notice unless paperwork made it strange. Tessa was not coming. Dana had made that clear during the briefing. Tessa was with her attorney and an investigator in a secure office in Cedar Basin, opening internal systems, verifying crate codes, and identifying which approvals were genuine, which were altered, and which had been pushed after her signature. Her part would happen through sworn statements, access logs, and preserved records. Not redemption by heroics. Evidence. Reuben respected that more than he expected. Dana walked over, burgundy folder in hand, dark parka zipped high. "Your role is terrain support," she said. "I know. No entry unless instructed. I know. No searches. No handling records. No touching crates." Reuben looked at her. "You planning to read me my contract too?" Dana did not smile. "If the weather worsens, you tell us what the mesa is doing. That is why you are here." Reuben looked past her to the ridge, where loose snow lifted briefly and fell again. For years, being told the limits of his role would have felt like being dismissed. That morning, it felt different. Clean, almost. A boundary could be an insult. It could also be a rope line keeping the whole thing from falling apart. "I can do that," he said. Dana held his gaze a second longer. "I believe you can." It was not warm. It was better than warm. By noon, the sky began to change. Clouds gathered low over the far breaks. The gold faded from the stone. Wind came first as a steady hand against the trucks, then as a restless shove that sent dry snow running in thin streams across the ground. The forecast had called for the front after midnight. Winter did not honor paperwork any more than people did. The convoy moved out at 1:40 p.m. two federal SUVs, Paige's BLM truck. Reuben in the reserve vehicle with Condor secured beside him. The road east of the mesa began as packed snow and exposed gravel, then narrowed between low sandstone walls, junipers bent under old ice. Snow dust blew across the track in pale ribbons, not falling from above, so much as rising from the land itself. At first they could see the tire marks, then they could not. Ground blizzard was an honest name for it. The sky above remained a dull gray, but at eye level the world became white motion. Snow swept sideways, knee-high in some places, waist-high in drifts, erasing the service spur markers and softening the difference between road, shoulder, and wash. Dana's voice came over the radio. "Convoy halt. Visibility is dropping." Reuben stopped behind Paige's truck. Condor rose before the engine settled, ears forward, nose working at the seam of the door. Reuben looked at the GPS mounted on the dash. The screen showed the approximate spur. The windshield showed nothing but snow moving across red earth. Paige walked back, shoulders hunched against the wind. She opened Reuben's door, just enough to speak. "Map puts the spur within 200 yards. Markers are gone. Road cuts left after the split," Reuben said. "But there's a shallow wash before it. In this wind, it'll look like road. That why you're here." Condor pushed his nose toward the opening. Paige looked at the dog. "And why is he doing that?" Reuben unclipped Condor from the seat but kept the lead short. Maybe nothing. Useful nothing? Let's find out without making it mythology. That earned the smallest possible nod from Page. They moved on foot. Page set flagging tape in short intervals, bright pink strips snapping in the white air. Dana checked the GPS and kept the group tight. Reuben watched the ground, how the snow curled against buried rock where the wind cut smooth across open surface, where a faint depression suggested wheel compression beneath powder. Condor did not pull forward like a hero in a story. He stopped often, doubled back once, sneezed snow from his nose, tested the air near the track where the wind had not scoured everything clean. Then, beside a low cluster of juniper, the dog changed. His head lowered, his shoulders steadied. The good ear came forward, the damaged one tipped back. He moved 3 steps toward a shallow trough where the snow had been disturbed recently, then paused and looked at Reuben. Reuben crouched. There, beneath windswept powder, lay a faint dark smear of tire-exposed mud. The smell reached him only after Condor had already found it. Oil, rubber, cedar bedding, and the faint sour trace of quail feed, the same mix from the handling alcove, diluted by cold but not gone. "Fresh vehicle," Reuben said into the radio. "Likely transport. Spur is here." Dana did not praise the dog. She did not need to. "Mark it," she said. Page tied tape to the juniper. They followed the trace in short, careful sections. Reuben never let Condor range beyond the lead. The dog confirmed the scent, then waited while humans checked the map. Every 50 yards, Page marked the route. Every time the ground fell away, Reuben stopped the team until he could read the drift. The barn appeared slowly, first as a darker shape inside blowing white, then as a roofline, then as a long metal-sided building with 2 trucks backed near a loading door and yellow light showing through narrow windows. A permitted satellite rehabilitation and transport facility, a lawful-looking place at the edge of an unlawful hurry. Dana raised one hand. The team stopped. The next minutes became procedural, controlled, almost strangely quiet. Credentials shown, warrants served, personnel separated, vehicles secured, records preserved. Page kept Reuben outside the marked entry line, and he stayed there with Condor in the wind. That was harder than he expected. Not because he wanted to take over, because standing outside while other people carried the truth forward required a different kind of discipline than entering first. Through the loading door, Reuben saw enough. Rows of transport crates arranged with clean labels, veterinary supplies, clipboards, printed manifests. A quarantine area kept warm by humming heaters. Hooded raptors resting in covered enclosures, alive and protected from the cold, quiet under dim lights. Nothing looked cruel at first glance. Nothing looked like the sort of place a passerby would question. That was the chill of it. The wrongness had been filed, labeled, authorized, and warmed. Blaine Garrison stood near the inner office wearing a black parka that looked too clean for the road outside. He was taller than Reuben expected, silver hair combed back, face composed in the practiced way of a man who had spent years turning concern into donations. "This is an administrative misunderstanding," Blaine said, voice carrying just enough for the room. "Skyreach has always cooperated with responsible oversight." Dana's answer was calm. "Then you will continue cooperating. These animals are part of authorized transfers." Dana opened her folder. "We will verify that. You may be disrupting critical conservation work." "No," Dana said. "We are preserving it from being used as cover." For the first time, Blaine's expression shifted. Not much. Enough. One of the federal officers began reading crate numbers against the list Tessa had provided remotely. Dana compared them to export preparation records. A second officer photographed altered band documentation. Page logged where each crate sat and who had access to the loading area. Hollis Fenwick, patched in by secure video, confirmed again that several listed transfer acknowledgments bearing his name were not his. Lenora, on a separate line, matched band histories against known breeding records and age estimates. The pieces did not shout. They clicked. Crate number to altered destination code. Altered code to delegated credential. Credential to Tessa's office while Tessa was out of state. False acknowledgement to Hollis. Expedite note to BG. Manifest to private airfield. At 4:12 p.m., Dana received the radio call from Cedar Basin. Orson Bellamy had been stopped at the private airfield, while trying to argue that state compliance clearance covered the movement. It did not. He had no federal authority to override Dana's hold, but his emails showed inspection schedules, early warnings to Skyreach, and repeated rerouting of local complaints away from field review. Paige heard the update and looked toward Reuben through the blowing snow. She did not smile, but her eyes said something like, "There is the shape of it." A second call came 20 minutes later. Dax Farrow had given a statement. With counsel present and irritation apparently doing battle with fear, he admitted receiving route development payments from Rimline Outdoor Strategy. He claimed he believed Skyreach wanted future Adventure Tour access if closure boundaries changed. He admitted he pushed clients toward western approaches on dates provided by the contractor. He denied knowing anything about bird transfers. Dana's only response was, "Document it." No one was clean because they had been useful. No one was useless because they had been dirty. That, Reuben thought, was how real cases worked. Not like lightning. Like weather, pressure gathering from several directions until the storm finally showed itself. By dusk, the wind had worsened. Snow moved in sheets across the yard, turning the trucks into ghosts with hazard lights. The Raptors were transferred to authorized care under Dana's supervision. Records were sealed. Drives were imaged. Crates were tagged. Blaine Garrison's calm had thinned to something flatter, but he never raised his voice. Men like him rarely did. They trusted the room to remember their titles. Reuben stood outside the barn as the last transport team carried covered crates toward a heated vehicle. Condor sat close against his leg. The dog's coat was flecked white. Snow gathered along the black saddle of his back, and the pale crescent on his chest appeared whenever the wind lifted the fur. There he did not look at the crates now. He looked at Reuben. Reuben rested a gloved hand on the dog's neck. Inside the barn, Dana's voice continued, steady and exact. Paige's flagging tape snapped in the wind. Somewhere through the radio, Lenora was correcting someone's species, shorthand with exhausted fury. Hollis muttered that whoever forged his acknowledgment had terrible form. Tessa remained miles away, opening files instead of trying to stand in the center of a rescue she had not earned, and Reuben did not turn to check behind him. The realization came without ceremony. He had spent years believing vigilance meant never allowing another person to hold the line. But that evening, in the whiteout on North Candle Mesa, the line held because many people had taken one section each. His field notes, Paige's chain of custody, Dana's warrant, Lenora's science, Hollis's refusal to lend his name to a lie, Tessa's logs, Dax's route dates, Bellamy's emails, Blaine's manifest, Condor's nose at the last buried spur. Small things held by separate hands had become too heavy to move aside. Reuben looked into the blowing snow. The world was not safe. It had never been safe. But for the first time in a long while, unsafe did not mean alone. Condor leaned into his hand. Reuben stayed where Dana had told him to stay, and watched the evidence leave in federal vehicles. A few weeks after the whiteout, North Candle Mesa still held winter, but winter no longer looked like a locked door. The snow remained in the shaded cuts, packed blue beneath overhangs, and gathered in the cracks between red stone. At noon, meltwater began to thread down the sandstone faces and freeze again by evening in thin silver lines. The sun climbed higher each day. Far off on the north cliffs, dark shapes had started to return to the air. Raptors, Lenora Pike said, were better calendar keepers than men. Reuben Slate stood below the old seasonal closure sign while Condor sat beside him, wearing the dark olive harness with the muted orange trim. The dog's black and gold coat had grown fuller in the cold. The pale crescent on his chest showed clearly when he lifted his head toward the rim. Above them, a pair of peregrines cut across the wind. Reuben did not speak. He had learned that some returns did not need narration. Skyreach's permits were suspended pending investigation. The official words were careful, as official words always were. But this time careful did not mean empty. Federal investigators had taken control of the records. Blaine Garrison's name now appeared in documents he could no longer edit, paired with crate manifests, altered destination codes, and a line of approvals that had once looked harmless, because each one was small. Orson Bellamy was under review for misuse of access, interference with inspections, and improper handling of contractor materials. Paige Calder never gloated about that. She only sent Reuben one message after the first finding became formal. "You were right to copy everything." Reuben read it twice, then put the phone away. He did not need to frame that either. Tessa Kincaid resigned from Skyreach before anyone could ask her to stand in front of cameras and explain herself. There were people in town who called her brave. There were others who called her careless. Tessa did not argue with either group. When Reuben saw her again, she was outside the Cedar Basin Records office, wearing a dark parka with no logo and holding a cardboard box of files against her hip. Without the Skyreach badge, she looked both younger and more tired. The Falcon wing hair clip still held her hair back, but it no longer looked decorative. It looked like something she had not decided whether to keep. "I gave Dana the last internal export," Tessa said. Reuben nodded. "She told me. I signed too many things because I thought I understood the room." Her eyes moved toward the distant mesa. "Turns out I understood the speeches. It would have been easy to comfort her. Easier still to punish her." Reuben did neither. "Understanding late is still better than protecting late," he said. Tessa accepted the sentence the way she had accepted Dana's questions. Not as forgiveness, but as something she would have to carry. Dax Farrow lost his commercial guiding authorization inside the reserve for a full season. He did not disappear from the internet. Men like Dax rarely did, but the videos changed. There were fewer speeches about closed mines and more silent clips of trail crews repairing unauthorized approaches. One morning, Reuben found Dax at the western boundary, wearing a plain gray beanie instead of the rust-orange vest, pulling old webbing from a crack in the rock under Paige's supervision. He looked up when Condor padded to the base of the closure sign and sat there perfectly still. Dax glanced at the sign, then at the dog, then at Reuben. For once, Dax did not step past the post to prove a point. "Guess I can read," he muttered. Reuben said, "That'll save everybody time." Dax almost smiled, then went back to work. It was not redemption. It was better than that. It was behavior. At the end of March, Elise Branwell offered Reuben a longer contract. He did not answer immediately. Elise, who had once spoken to him through a screen in the careful voice of risk management, came in person this time. She wore snow boots too clean for the service yard and held the revised contract in a folder against her coat. "We'd like you to stay through the next season," she said, "if you're willing." Reuben looked toward the mesa. Condor was lying near the steps of the auxiliary station, watching Paige argue with a volunteer about parking too close to a restoration area. "I have one condition," Reuben said. Elise's mouth tightened with professional worry. "All right. Field rangers, including seasonal and contract staff, need an independent escalation route for safety and resource warnings if the mid-level response stalls. That's a policy change. Yes, that takes time. So did the problem." Elise looked at him then, not as a file, not as an optics issue, but as a man standing in front of her with snow on his boots and no interest in dramatizing himself. "I'll take it upstairs," she said. "No," Reuben replied. "Put it in writing that you will." A pause. Then Elise opened the folder and made a note. That mattered more to him than the extension, not because he wanted to win, because a warning should not have to depend on whether the person hearing it found the messenger convenient. Commander Malcolm Kincaid came 3 days later. He arrived in a dark rental truck, driving slowly over the packed gravel road toward the cabin. Reuben saw him before the knock. An older man stepped out carefully, tall but narrowed by age, wearing a camel-brown overcoat, gray flat cap, and dark gloves. His white hair was trimmed in the old military style. He carried a manila envelope in one hand. Condor rose from the porch but did not bark. Malcolm stopped at the bottom step. "Reuben," he said. The voice was older. The posture was not. Reuben did not invite him inside. Malcolm seemed to understand. He looked out across the white-streaked mesa, then down at the envelope. "I wrote this after the inquiry," he said. "Supplemental endorsement. I stated that your concerns were raised before the exercise. I stated that the final finding did not reflect the sequence clearly." Reuben looked at the envelope but did not take it. "Why didn't I see it?" Malcolm's jaw shifted. Not enough to be emotion in a younger man, enough in an old one. "It was not included in the final package. I asked why I didn't see it." Malcolm closed his eyes briefly. because when it disappeared up the chain, I told myself I had done my part. Wind moved across the porch, dry and cold. Reuben had imagined this conversation for years in simpler shapes. In those versions, Malcolm was a coward, or a liar, or a man who had never tried. The truth standing in front of him was less satisfying. Malcolm had tried once, stopped once, and lived afterward with the convenience of believing effort was the same as responsibility. That memorandum would have mattered, Reuben said. I know. No, Reuben said. You know now. Malcolm absorbed that. He did not defend himself. I am sorry, he said. The words came plainly, not beautifully, not with enough force to travel backward through time. But they came to the right person. Reuben took the envelope. He did not forgive him. He did not refuse him. He only held the paper and said, "At least now you said it where I could hear." That was all the day allowed. Tessa was waiting near the truck when Malcolm left. She had not joined the conversation. Reuben respected that. "If you file for correction," she said, "I'll give a statement about how Skyreach and Bellamy misused your old record." Dana said she can document that part through the case. My father will authenticate the memorandum. Reuben looked at the envelope in his hand. Filing means trusting another board to read what's in front of them. Yes, Tessa said. He almost laughed, not because it was funny, because life had a cruel sense of structure. It took him 9 days to sign the application, not because the form was difficult. The form was simple. Boxes, dates, attachments, explanation, evidence. The hard part was deciding that the first failure did not own every future attempt. When he finally signed, Condor was under the table with his head on Reuben's boot. Reuben sealed the envelope and set his palm on it for a moment, as if checking whether paper still had weight. Then the story moved forward the way real stories do. Slowly, a year passed. Another winter found North Candle Mesa under snow. Reuben no longer lived in the auxiliary cabin, as if he might vanish before anyone learned the sound of his truck. The contract had become permanent enough to require more keys. The independent escalation policy was still being argued over in offices, but it existed now in draft form, with his line written into the discussion. Condor was no longer temporary. His new collar was red-brown leather, plain except for a small tag that read Condor, North Candle Mesa. He still slept near the door sometimes, but not because he expected to flee. Some creatures liked thresholds. That was all. The Navy letter arrived on a morning so bright it made the snow look almost blue. Reuben read it at the cabin table. The decision was formal, measured, and late. It acknowledged that additional documentation supported his original safety concerns. It found that the adverse notation in his record did not fully reflect the sequence of events. It ordered the correction. At the end, in language restrained enough to belong to an institution and human enough to matter, it expressed regret for the prior handling of the record. There was an apology. Reuben read it once, then again. Condor lifted his head. Reuben did not cry. He did not smile. He did not feel the world repair itself. A letter could not give back the years in which he had measured every room for exits and every promise for failure. But it could do one thing. It could stop the lie from being official. Reuben folded the letter carefully and placed it in the desk drawer beneath the map of North Candle Mesa. He did not frame it. He did not photograph it. He did not send it to everyone who had doubted him. The thing he had needed most had happened before the letter arrived. He had placed the truth in other hands, and this time they had not dropped it. Later that afternoon, he drove to the North Ridge with Condor. The sky was clear. Snow lay smooth across the red stone, broken only by rabbit tracks, wind marks, and the dark dots of juniper shadows. In a legal off-lead area away from the nest enclosures, Reuben unclipped Condor's lead. The dog stood for a second, surprised by the freedom. Then he ran. Not far. Just ahead, paws striking snow, tail level, ears uneven in the wind. He reached a low rise, stopped, and looked back. At the beginning, Reuben had been afraid that anything released would leave. Condor waited. Reuben walked toward him. Above the far cliff, 2 peregrines turned on a cold current of air. Condor sat and watched them with the same upward stillness Reuben had seen on the day he named him. Reuben did not call him away. He stood beside the dog and looked up too. Neither of them was waiting to be rescued anymore. They had found a place wide enough to stay. Sometimes healing does not arrive as a loud victory. Sometimes it comes quietly, through one honest record, one person willing to listen, and one loyal companion who reminds us not to carry every burden alone. Reuben did not get back the years he lost, but he found something just as powerful: the courage to trust again, one step at a time. And maybe that is one of life's small graces, that even after disappointment, God can still place the right people, the right truth, and even the right dog on our path. If this story touched your heart, share your thoughts in the comments. Tell us what Condor and Reuben's journey meant to you. And if you enjoy stories of loyalty, justice, and quiet hope, please subscribe and come back for the next one. May peace find you where you are, and may you never have to carry your truth alone.